So the one thing I was hoping for after Google I/O was an indication as to whether or not Google could maintain the $4.99 and above Android tablet market. It's not that Android can't exist above there. It's that I needed to see from Google whether or not they were going to take Android and turn it from just a decent tablet OS into a good tablet/notebook OS. And the reason that's the bar that Google had to meet is because of Windows 8 and Windows RT. If you look at the Asus Transformer series, the one thing those devices did an incredible job of is really bridging that divide between notebook and tablet. Where they fell short was that Android didn't really work as a notebook OS. It was great as a tablet OS, great as a smartphone OS, but once you start using it like a notebook, honestly, I'd prefer using a Windows or a Mac notebook. And some of that's just application availability and really tailoring the overall experience to that usage model. And by the end of this year, come this fall with Windows 8 and Windows RT, you'll actually be able to get that, right? You'll be able to get the form factor, battery life, the thinness, the lightness, everything we've loved about the Transformer series from Asus, but it'll run Windows 8. So you'll have a great tablet experience, and when docked, you'll also have a great Ultrabook sort of experience. And that form factor, that hybrid model is only going to get more interesting going forward as we get into Haswell and future Intel architectures. But the point being, then, presumably after this fall, if you're going to spend $4.99 on a tablet, you're either going to buy a Microsoft-based tablet or you're going to buy an iPad. So what does that do for Android in the tablet space? The kind of unexpected thing that came out of Google I/O is Google embraced this idea and instead went directly after the Kindle Fire. This is the Google Nexus 7. It's the first Nexus tablet from Google. And just as in years past, the Nexus tablet or a Nexus device is something that's built by an OEM that Google selects, in this case Asus. And the idea is that it's the best that money can buy. It's the latest and greatest of everything, running the latest and greatest Android OS. In this case, it's Android 4.1, codenamed Jelly Bean. And the OEM in this case, the manufacturer that actually built this thing, is Asus. In fact, the Nexus 7 is really just the Asus ePad Nemo, which was a 7-inch tablet that Asus has showed off a number of times. With some minor tweaks, it became the Nexus 7. And the transition was actually made very, very well. From a build quality standpoint, it's honestly the best built Asus tablet I've ever used. And that's a lot to say because the previous Asus tablets, the Transformer Prime, the original Transformer, Transformer Pad Infinity, and even the Transformer Pad 300, these are all well-built tablets, at least as well-built as the competition from Samsung and Motorola. But this just feels nice. It feels even better. It's got this kind of soft-touch plastic on the outside that's not too tacky, but it's smooth enough where it kind of offers that almost leather-like feel to the overall device. Obviously, the front is all glass. Build quality is very, very solid. No creaks, no squeaks, nothing like that. It's a 7-inch tablet. Display resolution is 1280 by 800. So right here I have a Kindle Fire, which is a 1024 by 600. That's the resolution on this tablet itself, even though they're very, very similar in terms of size. The resolution is pretty much the primary advantage of the Asus panel that's used in the Nexus 7. Brightness is actually a little dimmer. You're looking at the low 300 nit range at max brightness. Black levels are also better though. And as a result, you get competitive contrast ratio with the Kindle Fire. Now the Kindle Fire is an important comparison because obviously both are priced at $199. The Nexus 7 for $199 gives you 16 gigs of NAND flash storage. 8 gigs of NAND flash storage. From $249, you get that boosted up to 16 gigs. Unfortunately, there's no way of expanding storage. That's actually the one Achilles heel of this whole device. So there's no micro SD card slot, and by default, USB on the go for storage is not supported. So unfortunately, you are stuck with the 8 or 16 gigs you get here. Out of principle, I have an issue with the 16 gig version because you're looking at a couple dollars worth of NAND being sold for a $50 adder. And it doesn't really buy you all that much more space for movies, music, and photos and games and stuff like that. But if you are planning on using the device to store that, then obviously it's still a great deal at $249. The limited storage capacity basically ensures that this is going to be a streaming device. You can throw individual TV episodes, you can throw some of your music library, some of the smaller photos, stuff like that. You can throw tons of that on there. But this isn't the type of device that you're going to take and throw 4 gig movie rips on. You can, but you're not going to be able to fit more than one on here. But if you find yourself using, Google's Play Store to stream movies, or Netflix runs beautifully on it, stuff like that, if you're okay with streaming content to it, it works very well. And with that out of the way, that's actually the only downside of this tablet. Otherwise, it's incredible. So the Kindle Fire was unique because it combined, for the first time at $199, it combined decent hardware with decent software. And that's basically the same formula that Google follows with the Nexus 7. The hardware and the software are just better than on the Kindle Fire. So whereas the Kindle Fire was based on an older version of Android, here you have the latest and greatest, Android 4.1 Jelly Bean. So it's even smoother than Ice Cream Sandwich. Easily the smoothest UI that we've seen in an Android device to date. And it's very noticeable, very, very appreciable. There's still some slowdowns here and there, but for the most part, it is just butter smooth all throughout the UI. And Google really trumps that up, right? This is the first, kind of truly polished, seamless user experience Android device out there, or Android OS out there, and it is really, really nice. Whereas, you go back a couple years, or I guess a little over a year, to the introduction of Honeycomb, and there were still drops in frame rate, stuff like that. You could still definitely see, just from a UI perspective, the deficit that Android was at versus iOS. With Jelly Bean, that's been reduced to almost nothing. There's still some rough edges with third-party applications, for example, but the core OS, the main things that you would interact with, web browsing, email, just navigating through home screens, the application launcher, stuff like that, it's all incredibly smooth. So you get a better OS than what the Kindle Fire comes with. And then on the hardware side, you still have better hardware as well. So inside here is a Tegra 3 SoC. This is actually the latest and greatest from NVIDIA. You have 4 ARM Cortex-A9 cores. The particular Tegra 3 SoC that's in here is the T30L. So if you look at all of the available Tegra 3 tablet SoCs, you have the T30L, the T30, and the T33. And I listed that in terms of increasing performance. So despite the slower... Well, actually, let me take a step back here. The reason there are so many different versions of the Tegra 3 is this. Generally speaking, ARM-based SoCs in the tablet and smartphone space at the high end, let's say they sell for somewhere around $14 to $25. It's not a ton of money, and especially since most of the players there are fabless semiconductors, they have to share that $14 to $25 with IP providers as well as the foundry itself, so TSMC, Global Foundries, who have you. Because of that, there's an inherent desire to, there's always a desire to maximize profit, but there's a even larger pressure to ensure that you're using as many chips from every wafer you get back from the fab. Now, every wafer you get back from the fab is going to have a distribution of good chips, and even with that distribution of good chips, you're going to get chips that can run at higher clocks than others, that use less power than others, so on and so forth. Now, one way of making use of an entire wafer is to have various clock and performance targets that you can hit. And in NVIDIA's case, we happen to have 3 different targets. The T30L would be the chips that kind of barely meet the clock speed targets for the higher performance parts. But let's say they don't run at 500 megahertz on the GPU side. They can only do, say, 450. Well, those will end up getting fused down to the 416, 420 megahertz that they run at. And those chips that may not be able to be sold into a transformer pad Infinity, for example, will find themselves right at home inside of a Nexus 7. NVIDIA will pass along the savings to ASUS and Google by charging a little bit less, and as a result, they don't have to throw that chip away. They actually make better use of the wafer, which brings down the overall cost basis of the entire platform. And as a result, NVIDIA can kind of make more money even though it's selling these chips at very, very low prices. Now, despite the clock speed kind of disadvantage, the performance impact to gaming isn't really that bad. I've tried Dead Trigger, Grand Theft Auto, a lot of titles here on Android running at maximum detail settings that are available in the game at the panel's native 1280 by 800 resolution, and they all played really, really well. So no really complaints there. And part of this is Tegra 3 was really built to run at this resolution. At 1920 by 1080 or 1920 by 1200, you're kind of pushing it. But at 12 by 800, it's effectively a smartphone at this point. So no issues there from a performance standpoint. So the T30L, you still get all 4 cores. Base clock speed for multiple cores active has been reduced to 1.2 gigahertz with only a single core active. It'll actually go up to 1.3 gigahertz. GPU clock goes down from about 500 megahertz down to about 400 megahertz. So there's an appreciable reduction in performance, but it's still fast and way faster than the Kindle Fire. And I'm not just talking about loading web pages and stuff like that. Thanks to Jelly Bean, the actual overall user experience, user interface speed, all the stuff that I talked about Android 4.1 really improving over previous versions of Android, that's the most tangible performance improvement you'd see over the Kindle Fire. It actually shocked me when I dusted off literally the Kindle Fire for this review. It hadn't been updated since 6.3.1. And my assumption was that Amazon would eventually go back and add GPU acceleration into the browser and stuff like that, but that never happened. And as a result, even though the Kindle Fire was great for its time, the Nexus 7 is just so much better. And as a Nexus device, it's kind of guaranteed that it'll have the latest and greatest releases of Android as they come down the pipe. So from a hardware and software standpoint, clearly superior to the Kindle Fire. Just in terms of portability, because it's a 7-inch tablet, it's something that I wouldn't mind carrying around with me all the time. Now, 10-inch tablets are great. They're better than notebooks in terms of being really, really light, having great battery life. But a 7-inch tablet is just all that much better. The way I kind of view it as is the difference between an 11-inch notebook and a 13-inch notebook. The 13-inch notebook, especially like an Ultrabook or a MacBook Air, is incredibly thin, incredibly light. Way better than like the 14 or 15-inch models that you might have had just from a couple years ago. But it's still a traditional notebook, still looks and feels like one. It's still not something you would necessarily want to carry in place of, for example, an iPad. The 11-inch notebook, however, the 11-inch Ultrabook or MacBook Air, it's just that much smaller. And it's just small enough to be kind of this kind of in-between device. Different enough where maybe you would take it places where you wouldn't take a 13-inch notebook. Maybe it does end up being a 10-inch tablet replacement. The screen's a little more cramped. It's not for everyone. But there's this subset of users that's perfect for them. They're attracted to it. It's that extra portability that you get that makes giving up the screen real estate worthwhile. And that's the same sort of dichotomy we have here with the 7-inch and 10-inch tablet space. I think if you're going to ultimately have a single tablet as your primary computing device, then a 10-inch tablet makes sense. The added screen real estate is nice. And it's not necessarily real estate, just the screen size, the fact that everything's larger, the fact that you don't have to zoom as much on web pages to read them. It's more comfortable. But if you have other devices, if you have a notebook, right, and the tablet is only for really for portability, really so you don't have to carry the notebook just for reading email, browsing the web, let's say reading books, reading through magazines, stuff like that. If you're willing to make that trade-off in terms of portability, I think the 7-inch tablet form factor is a great augment to let's say a 13-inch or larger notebook. So again, if it's not your primary computing device, I think a 7-inch tablet works very, very well. And the Nexus 7 is awesome. It's easily the best 7-inch tablet on the market. Way better than the Kindle Fire. If you're torn between the two, the one thing that the Kindle Fire brings forward is you have a great integration of Amazon's store and the ability to buy content. If you want to buy Kindle books, for example, on the Nexus 7, you actually have to use the web browser to do that. But if you're okay with that, if you can deal with that, there's a Kindle Reader app for Android. And it's actually even smoother and even faster than it is on the Kindle Fire. So even if you want to use this thing as an e-reader, it's awesome. And the greatness of the Nexus 7 actually extends beyond just 7-inch tablets. Unlike the Kindle Fire, this thing won't die after 5 hours. For playing back local video content, even casually browsing the web, you're looking at 9 to 10 hours of battery life out of a 7-inch tablet, which is pretty impressive. Now, that being said, you can't do a lot of local video playback. There's just not a ton of storage on this device. You do have to stream a lot. Doing that, you'll have a shorter lasting battery life. And at the same time, if you do anything that really, really stresses the GPU, so doing a lot of 3D gaming, stuff like that, you can expect to see sub 5 hours of battery life on that. But as a device that you kind of take with you on an airplane and just want to have be able to watch movies for, let's say, 9 or 10 hours, it works if you can get the content on there. And again, I go back to what I said originally. That's really the one downside, that there's no way of expanding or taking advantage of just how good this is, because you're limited by local storage. So in the airplane use case, it's kind of annoying. But like I said, it actually, the 7-inch tablet, the Nexus 7 isn't just a good 7-inch tablet. It's actually a great tablet, period. At $199, it's far less of a commitment than a $499 iPad would be. And if this isn't going to be your primary computing device, and you just kind of want a tablet for the maybe 15-20% of the time that you want to kind of chill on the couch and use it, I think it's perfect. I think it's arguably even better than any other tablet on the market just for that specific purpose because it is so low cost. And since we're still in that hyper Moore's law period of smartphone and tablet evolution, it actually makes more sense to spend as little as possible each year. Because just as the Nexus 7 dwarfed the Kindle Fire, in another 12 months there's going to be something that's way, way better than this. And another 12 months after that, there's going to be something way better than that. And that's really the reason that I've been very, very hesitant to spend, let's say $700 or $800 on a fully loaded iPad or a fully loaded ARM-based tablet, simply because the next year's version is going to be so much better. This is akin to kind of how things were in the PC industry early on, where you'd buy a device or you'd buy a new desktop, and then a year later it would be completely obsolete. We've been spoiled by how good things have been in the PC industry for the past few years, that you could buy a computer and still have it be awesome for the next 3 years. Or even longer. We're not quite there with smartphones or tablets yet. So as a result, if you want a tablet, if it's not going to be your primary computing device, I'd really give the Nexus 7 strong consideration. I think at $199, it's difficult to go wrong with it. And definitely versus the Kindle Fire, it's a great buy. I go into more detail on numbers, battery life, performance, so on and so forth in the full review, so be sure to take that out as well. And thanks for watching.